Hello, I'm Allison Silberberg, the former mayor of Alexandria, Virginia, and welcome to Conversations with Allison. This is a Zebra Press production on their production channel called ZTV. You can watch all our shows on thezebra.org or on their Facebook page. And today we are honored to have Marian Van Landingham here with us to talk about our incredible city and the Commonwealth of Virginia and what she knows about our history. And it's just amazing. So Marian Van Landingham, welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So you served in the General Assembly for 24 years, and we're going to come back to that in a second, but it's amazing that the career that you've had. And as I went back and looked at all of your accomplishments and how you've been so involved, you've made such a difference in our city. And so we'll talk about that.
Well, thank you. I love the little city.
Now, you're not originally from here.
No, I'm originally from Georgia.
So where in Georgia?
Atlanta.
Okay. And Vola Lawson was from there. Did you know her there?
I didn't know her there. I certainly knew her here.
Right. So Vola Lawson, our longtime city manager, about 15 years in the city.
Right.
As city manager. And then she had other roles here, too.
Oh, yeah. She knew the city bureaucracy thoroughly, which is one of the things that made her so effective, I think. She knew where every pothole in the town was.
And she got things done.
She got things done because of it.
Right.
You know,
she knew how to make a phone call.
It's a complicated little town, and she managed to keep up with all the special problems that somebody coming in here from outside wouldn't necessarily, pick up on it, or it would take them a long time. Mm-hmm. But she had the memory of all these places.
It's fantastic. So you're from Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Your parents and you had one brother. Mm-hmm. And you told me he just passed away.
Right.
I'm so sorry. But the four of you living in Atlanta in that area. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your parents for a second. Well, what did your dad do?
My dad was with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Farmers Home Administration. He was state director of that. So, and that moved us around the state in my younger years, you know. But it was one of those things that came out of the Depression. You know, it was an opportunity, one, to rehab the rural areas, mm-hmm. and the federal government helping with that. And that was his career.
And so you were born just before World War II,
right,
in the Great Depression. But that probably, by the time you were of age to know things, the war was almost over.
Yeah, that's right.
And but so there you are with your brother. Was your brother older than you?
No, he was 3.5 years younger. 3.5
mm-hmm. years younger? Okay. Well, again, I'm sorry. And what was his name?
Sam.
Sam. So Sam and Marian.
Mm-hmm.
That's sweet. And your mom was a homemaker.
Yes.
and involved in the community? Or?
Yeah, she was a homemaker, but she was a degree in home economics, which is what
it was unusual to have a college degree back then, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay. And so education was something that they emphasized for you and
Absolutely.
Sam?
Absolutely.
All right. And so then what made you, well, first of all, where did you go to college?
Emory University.
Oh.
In Atlanta.
Right there.
Right. I was a political science major and master's.
So undergraduate and a master's degree at Emory?
Political science.
And poli-sci, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you love that?
Yeah, I did. And I took part in the Washington semester at American University when I was a senior.
Oh.
So that brought me up earlier.
So you kind of got the bug for Washington and
yeah, but I didn't come here immediately.
Yeah, you went back home.
Went back home, stayed and did public relations work for Emory and Georgia Tech and the CDC before I came up here.
So the CDC, which is in the news as we speak a lot right now, because of the coronavirus. So, what kind of work did you do for the CDC while you were
writing about diseases from nature to man? I used all their budget.
You did?
and then left.
Oh. And then So this is, I'm just trying to think, it would have been in the 60s that you were doing that?
Yeah,
or the early
60s, both.
Because Rachel Carson's book came out in the early 60s, right? So Silent Spring. Okay, so her book, though, was more focused on actually environmental damage as we create problems like DDT.
Right.
Right, so, but you didn't cover that in your pamphlet with the CDC? Okay.
No, it was a whole little booklet, but it was more of how normally a lot of diseases do come out of the natural world and then adapt to people. Well, Ebola is an example now,
right,
for instance. And probably the new flu is, because it came out of a wild animal market in China.
That's right. Well, they think it might have come from bats.
That's right, something like that.
Something like that, that bit a live wild animal that was at the market.
Right.
It's amazing how they can trace all this,
Yeah.
isn't it? Do you remember people talking about Spanish flu and that epidemic of 1918?
No.
Do you remember anyone who was affected by that?
No.
Okay.
That was a little earlier.
I know that was earlier, but sometimes things that happened just before we're born.
Yeah.
And what about the war? Did World War II? Did people
Well, I was a child. I knew that. Knew
Right.
about that.
And did people discuss when the men and women came home, especially the GIs when they came home? Did you know any cousins?
Well, I had a cousin that was served in the European front. But my dad, because he was doing government work here and had small children, didn't have to go.
Right. So that was the exception at that time.
Yeah.
Right. So then eventually you moved up to the D.C. area, but you lived in Arlington in the beginning,
Well,
right?
in Shirlington for a little, for a very short time, and then I had joined the Art League, and the Art League moved down into Old Town, and I would come down, and I felt like I was losing my warm blanket when I'd go back 8 floors over the Shirley Highway.
Love that. So you wanted to live here, not just paint here.
That's right, and so I began looking for a place and first found an apartment at 501 Cameron on the upstairs. And then about 3 years later, bought my present house.
Okay. But it's also on Cameron.
Also on Cameron.
And so now you worked in the D.C. area before you focused on other matters. So
Yeah.
I thought that was very interesting. I didn't realize that you had done speech writing for...
Yeah. Congressman Phil Landrum of Georgia. He represented the Appalachian part of North Georgia and introduced the Appalachian Act for Lyndon Johnson. He was a really good person.
Okay.
But working for one person at some point gets a little tiresome. And I finally sort of went part-time with him and then started working on the Alexandria Bicentennial. So I could stay in town and didn't have to go back to Washington every day.
So you were working on that. That was a very big deal at the time.
It was a very big deal at the time, and I was president of the Art League, too, by that time. And that was what really got me involved in starting the Torpedo Factory, was that our lease was running out at 501 Cameron, 315 Cameron. And it's there in the middle of the block opposite City Hall. And I was looking at every pigeon-filled space in Old Town, trying to figure out where we could afford to go. And had Jim Goldsmith, that was editor of what's then the Port Packet.
So the Alexandria Gazette Packet.
he was chair of the Bicentennial Commission, and I was complaining to him one day about the lack of space, and he said, "Why not the Torpedo Factory? They don't know what to do with it."
So the Torpedo Factory, during the war, World War I or World War II, or both?
It was built at the end of World War I, so it was not actually used. World War II, it was used.
For the munitions.
And after the war, the federal government used it for all the Nazi war records were brought there and studied by historians. And
including the Nuremberg trials?
Everything, yes. And then it was called the Federal Record Center. people reading books and things now would know that as a Federal Record Center. And after a while, the originals were sent back to the countries of origin, but our archives kept copies of everything, of course.
Okay.
Then there was a long period in which the federal government simply used the buildings for storage. Our building, the part that's now the Art Center, was mostly government furniture, old desk, and
sort of a dumping ground of furniture.
For the GSA. The building just north of us across Cameron Street, end of Cameron Street, was Smithsonian stuff, you know.
Interesting.
So it was just storage. When the city bought the buildings in the late 60s and then didn't know what to do with them, but they got the whole 3 city blocks for like $1.5 million.
Which was a lot of money then, but still, the fact that they got all of that.
A huge amount of space.
Huge.
But,
right.
you know, it was ugly and dirty. And there was cyclone fencing across the ends of the streets. Cameron Street, Queen Street, King Street all had cyclone fencing to keep you off the docks. And the docks were rotting. So it was not exactly prime space
Not
when
like
we
it is
moved
now.
in.
Yeah.
No.
So Mr. Goldsmith, the publisher and the editor of the Alexandria Gazette Packet,
Yeah.
he's the chair of the Bicentennial. You're involved in that. You're working on that. You become friends. You mentioned to him. I mean, it's just almost by chance, really.
Well, he backed it, and the first time I mentioned it to Mayor Beatley, he loved it. He was very
Chuck
receptive.
Beatley,
He was
the
very,
mayor.
and then the National Bicentennial Chair was very supportive, and that was Senator Warner
Oh,
at that point.
okay.
And
He's an artist.
He's the artist, and he's still interested in the factory for that. But anyway, he got the National Bicentennial behind it. Now, there was never a consultant study. Never a consultant study. The city council approved it after much citizen discussion, and there were petitions against us and petitions for us, you know. And we had led tours of the building to explain what we had in mind. The artists loved the spaces immediately. A lot of the general public looked at it and said, oh my God, you know, because it was dirty. But the renovation, the city supported, said, okay, a 2-year experiment, and we'll give you $140,000. And that'll put one coat on the outside of the building. It was gold. And we'll put in some cold water sinks and some interior dividing walls, but not between the studios. And we got in and started painting and cleaning. It was approved in May by council.
And you wrote up a document, as I understand it, about a page or so long, that submitted the idea formally to the council, and there was some discussion about 1 page, no consultant, just let's take a chance, and the council voted for it unanimously?
Yes.
To give it a try for 3 years?
2 years.
2 years, and the $140,000 to just give it a quick coat of paint.
And the artist went in and started painting and cleaning. And every several days, I would go buy 15 gallons of antique white paint. And we had 3 extension poles.
Oh, because it was really a mess in there, right?
Oh, yeah, pigeons and trash and rats had been there. And, you know, and it was dirty government green paint, you know what.
And there were things everywhere, right? There were some furniture.
Well,
and
we didn't know. There was one spot on the 3rd floor, kind of behind the elevator, where there was a lot of pigeon splatter on what looked like a lot of brown paper. And I got curious about what was in that. And having my CDC experience, I went and got formalin solution and sprayed it good, and then looked into it. Started taking these newspaper things that were sort of long and narrow and rolls, tore it off, and there were mahogany table legs. And I figured I could trade something to the city carpenter for those. I did, and the city's work table in City Hall, the city council's work table.
In the workroom? That huge table?
Yes, has legs. That's where the mahogany table legs came from.
That's amazing. So the next time I go in.
You can pet them.
I'll pet them and say, you really came from the Torpedo Factory. So the city carpenter came over and immediately saw that he could do something with them.
Yeah, and we had to sort of trade with him as we were doing renovation work.
Did Chuck Beatley, the mayor at the time, did Mayor Beatley, he's just amazing the more I learn about him. And I say this as a former mayor, that he was really visionary.
Oh.
I understand that on the back of a napkin, he figured out where all the bus routes should go. And
he probably did.
And he just said, he just sort of drew a shape of the city of Alexandria and said A, B, and C, and drew circles. And that is how we have our routes to this day. I think they're just now thinking about changing a few things. But
he was the father of the Dash bus, no question. He was, imagine, he's a United Airlines pilot by profession. So he brought ideas from other places, too.
I see.
He had the idea of what we call Beatley bumps.
Oh yes, I've seen those.
On the streets where the sidewalk extends out a bit and makes it shorter for crossing streets. It was not accepted happily by a lot of people, so it only covered about a block or two of King Street
before it was stopped.
Before it was stopped, but he was very supportive of a lot of things and a very nice person, and he carried the council along with him. It was, and he built his own house in the West End by hand himself.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so you had this idea about what this building could be.
Right.
And you really led the community through, it wasn't, and people should know that it wasn't really a slam dunk.
Oh,
there
no.
were petitions against and petitions for.
Right.
And one of the people that who was in favor of it was Mr. Schumeyer.
Yeah, Pete Schumeyer. He was president of the Old Town Civic at the time. And when this story can be told, when petitions against us were put on people's doorsteps in Old Town, he sent his 3 daughters around to collect those and put a different one on.
Oh, to put a different petition down.
Right.
And then one of those is an artist today.
In the Torpedo Factory.
Lisa.
Yeah,
right.
in the Torpedo Factory. Yes, Lisa's there. So that was kind of fun. We did have support. There were, but understandably, there were environmentalists in town that wanted those ugly buildings all torn down in a green space along the river. That's what they envisioned. And we said, well, the city just got control of what's now Founders Park. Why don't you do something? It was just wild grass up there. They had known nothing about that. And we said, we had the Scottish pipers march up there and dedicate that as Founders Park.
Oh, was that your idea?
Yeah.
You and your team?
Because the first tobacco warehouse had been at the foot of Orinoco Street.
Right.
And it's named Orinoco Street after a form of tobacco. So, so we said, be satisfied, fix that up, and make that in the park. You already have it, basically,
That's funny.
And
because the city planner at the time, Engen Artemel, had told me that there was discussion about that a developer wanted to put buildings at Founders Park, and it was very close to happening.
Watergate wanted to put a high-rise there, and the city the citizens had fought that off. And then all of a sudden, they fought it off, mainly because saying that the boundaries of Maryland and the district come to the shores of Virginia. It's not down, the line's not down the middle of the river. So there was question about whether Founders Park was in Alexandria or was in the District of Columbia, and it was on that basis that they stopped.
I see.
The Watergate.
But today it's one of the most beloved open spaces in the city, and people from all over go. And of course, they go to the Torpedo Factory and to Founders Park. But let's go back to Torpedo Factory for a second. So you all put all this sweat equity into, it's really hard labor, as I understand it. You all had to clean it, paint it, and get it ready for the public and for the artists to create their art.
That's right.
And this was a different idea that the public could come in and buy art, but they could also paint. The artist would be painting and creating or making pottery or whatever art they're doing. And that's another thing. The Torpedo Factory has a wide range of artists.
Right.
It's not just painting. It's
right.
all kinds of art and all kinds of ages of artists. And
That's
you
right.
all were picking the artists, and it was kind of a tight community, right? Of friendships.
Yeah. Well, yes. Initially, of course, some of the first artists were members of the Art League that we knew. That gave us something to start with. And I asked for first month rent checks that I could show the city. Put them on a bulletin board in front of City Council.
Oh, okay.
To show, because there were people that thought all artists were hippies and we wouldn't pay rent.
Oh, so you wanted to show, and actually, the Torpedo Factory has supported itself from the get-go.
It still does.
Is that right?
It still does. It pays our rents and the rents from parties there. On
the first floor.
On the first floor, actually pay for the operation of the project of the building, which now is about $1 million a year, because the city has increased the staff significantly. So that's, we had, in the earliest days, there was myself, an assistant, and a part-time janitor from City Hall. That was the staff, in the early days. We for a while, we had a nice young man who was in the local jail for pot. And they let him out to come on work release during the day to come down to be our janitor. We called him Potluck.
Oh,
that helped. That was, that was our staff.
So you were really, you were just winging it, really.
Right.
Well, thank goodness for this gentleman who was on release. And I wonder where he is now.
Oh, he lives in Texas. He's a successful businessman.
Oh, isn't that great?
He came back for the burial of his father, and his family. He and his family came back for the burial of his father at Arlington. A couple of years ago, came in and introduced himself again to me.
Oh, how nice!
Wasn't that nice? And to his family.
Well, and of course, today he probably wouldn't be arrested because
no.
the laws are changing as we speak.
He was just a kid.
Yeah.
When that happened.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's an amazing story. And so all these bonds of friendship were formed. Mm-hmm. And you really you were really a visionary. And you got to know a lot of the community.
Oh, yeah.
And let's talk for a second about your art. Mm-hmm. And just for the sake of discussion, in case someone's just chiming in, we're here. This is Conversations with Allison on behalf of the Zebra Press, and we're honored that Marian Van Landingham, our former delegate, is joining us today. And we're here, actually, I want to mention, we're here in Gallery Lafayette, which is in the heart of Old Town, and at the corner of Royal and Prince, and it's owned and operated by, there's the clock, owned and operated by artist Todd Healy. So he's, as many people know, Todd Healy is a remarkable artist, and you can see some of his works behind us. And this is a great gallery. People come from far and wide, including Cokie Roberts came here for her work for one of her books. So the Torpedo Factory. So you have this background that's twofold. One is your commitment and talent in the arts. Mm-hmm. And back then you were painting oils?
No, I went to printmaking and to acrylics pretty quickly. And I was abstract for a good while, as everyone was.
Right. It's interesting how art evolves, right?
Evolves, yeah. Now it tends to be somewhat, I guess you could say, more realistic. It's very often based on my travels, things that I've seen elsewhere. I'm always looking for design, excuse me, everywhere I go. And then I come back and make an interpretation of that. And I do both paintings, the acrylic paintings, and fire enamels on copper. So I gave up printmaking a number of years ago.
Well, it's very common that an artist tries different formats.
Yeah.
And I would say it's ubiquitous, right?
Yeah.
So, and I've seen a number of your works, mm-hmm. and it's absolutely amazing. Your studio, first of all, overlooks the water like a lot of the studios do.
Well, I was going to say most of
Half the
the third
building.
The third floor only really has good views of the
Right.
river. The second floor, they're back out inside in the
But it's that natural light
yeah.
that those studio artists get, and so they have a sense of community. The public comes through, but then also this incredible natural light that is. That's really why people go sometimes to the south of France to paint, and David Hockney in California loves the light out there out west, and I mean the light is.
The light is helpful.
It is.
Well, it helps those of us on the river side of the third floor. It doesn't help the interior studios, and it doesn't really do much for the studios on the Union Street side,
But they still have some natural light.
Some natural light. Actually, in the morning, sometimes the sun comes. If it's a sunny day, the sun comes in so bright I have to pull the shades.
Right.
And it will be actually cold in there in the afternoon if it's a cool day,
right,
or a rainy day. It's so there are pluses and minuses to everything. But people do walk into the studio sometimes and have to, not without even looking at the paintings and enamels on the walls, go straight back and tell me what a beautiful view I have.
It is uplifting.
It is uplifting, but if enough people say that to you every day, you begin to
get tired.
Yeah, get a little tired of that.
Yeah.
And I think everyone on that side of the building has a little bit of that. But it's a whole. It is nice. I find that sometimes when I've gotten tired and end of working, just to sit occasionally and just glance out is nice. And the lighting on the river sometimes is quite interesting because it's not a lot. It's just a thin green line on the other side, but the atmospheric effects on the water itself and on the bridge that you can see the shadows of, down in the distance, makes it interesting. And sometimes it'll change. The lighting will change a number of times during the day.
Right, and with the cloud formations and the way the water flows and the light off the water
and the warmth of the water is the atmospheric effects of cold air against it or whatever.
Right. So here you have this background from the Hill, Capitol Hill, working for a congressman and having worked for the CDC and in Atlanta before that. I mean, very serious work. But you also have serious work and commitment in the arts. So, and you worked with the council and the mayor and the Old Town Civic Association leadership and others to get this created, and then there you are painting. And then how did you make that leap to running, because you ran for council at first in 1981.
79 actually.
Okay, 79.
Well, Beatley was followed by a less than supportive mayor, Frank Mann.
Okay.
Who cared more about bringing a baseball team to town than the art center. And so I decided I wanted to try to get a bit more support and clout for the Art Center. And so he had gotten legislation that no city employee could run for council through, so that I had to resign my job as director of the Art Center in order to run. I won in the primary and then lost in the general election by just a little bit. Jim Moran was the bottom winner that time, and I was right behind Jim and David Speck. David.
That's funny.
It was that close. So then I just did other volunteer. I started the volunteer bureau and did a couple of other things. Did some PR for the community Y, etc.
So the Community Y, which became the Campagna Center.
Right.
So is that when you got to know Elizabeth Ann Campagna? Or did you already know her?
I knew her, but that's when I really got to know her. Was the time I was doing some freelance work for them.
I see. And you were, as I understand it, very close to Mrs. Campagna.
Oh, yeah.
What a loss that she's gone.
Absolutely. It was phenomenal.
So tell me about your impressions of her. And
Well, you don't meet people like that normally. I mean, she was an incredible personality, so supportive. She cared so much, and she was hilariously funny in a grand way.
really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
You know,
She had a
it had
good
a
wit.
wonderful sense of humor. What they were thinking about, the community, the Y at that point was at the corner of Cameron Street and St. Asaph. They had outgrown the space. They did have a little garden behind it, and right now there's another building that was built on that site of the garden. But they were looking for something larger, and that was a time in which the city was actually getting rid of school buildings. The population had gone down enough.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when the Prince Street School went to Georgia Tech.
Virginia Tech?
Virginia Tech.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me, I didn't say Georgia
That's
Tech.
right.
Virginia Tech.
I knew what you meant.
And the school that was at the foot of Quaker Lane in Duke Street is now has a barbecue place in the basement, you know.
Okay. I have
And
to
anyway,
visualize
the school administration building became available, and so she was considering the possibility of buying one of those buildings from the city. And
that's pretty bold.
It was pretty bold.
But all on behalf of the children and some of our most vulnerable.
Yeah.
The mission hasn't really changed.
No,
it's
no,
a great nonprofit.
And you know, they kept expanding really what they were trying to do. It was wonderful.
It's really
So,
one of our best nonprofits still.
Yeah.
So you helped her with her cause of
Yeah,
the
and
but it wasn't called the Campagna Center at that point.
No, it was named for her later. It was a community Y at that point because they had broken with the national Y, National Women's Y. One of the funniest lines that she ever said to me, though, was that she was trying not to get too excited. And she said, "I'm trying to be dispassionate about this, but as my late husband once said, you've never said a dispassionate word in your life."
Wow. So she was
She was special.
she had a lot of spunk, let's say, a lot of passion,
A lot of passion.
but she also encouraged others to get involved. I mean, that was one of her gifts, right? That she really launched 1,000 ships here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, having a men's ministry to the jail, to the women in the jail, for instance.
That was her idea?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
You know, the Right to Read program to work with, was,
Right.
she worked with Mrs. Wright to fund it and to start that with volunteers helping children learn to read. You know, there were all kinds of things, programs sort of just kept growing that Elizabeth Ann saw a need for.
Now, did Vola Lawson help her and you in that cause as she was she involved at all? Were they friends?
I don't know. I think they probably probably were.
I know Patsy.
Vola came up. She was head of housing for the city, so she was a city employee before becoming city manager.
That's right.
You know, so I'm not sure. While she was a city employee in the housing, I didn't really have any contacts with her, to speak of until
later.
Until later.
Now, Patsy Tyser and Mrs. Campagna were
friends.
Were very friendly, as I understand it, and then you and Patsy served together at the same time. Some of that overlapped a little bit in Richmond.
I was a delegate about 10 or 15 years before she came to Richmond.
Let's talk about that. So you ran for council, didn't win by a squeaker, and then you ran. Then you went.
The Democratic Committee asked me to run for delegate.
And you were the first female to serve in that seat, isn't that true?
No. Marian Gallen,
oh, okay.
Who was active in the League of Women Voters, apparently had been, but there was a gap of period in which, and I've forgotten the years
So-
that she was there. There was a gap of years between us.
Okay, so Mrs. Gowan, that's right, I forgot about that. So, and then you ran for it and won.
Yeah,
And Lois Walker, who became
was my manager.
was your campaign manager,
Campaign manager.
and we all miss Lois
Lois.
Walker terribly, and so she served on the council eventually for 2 terms
Yeah,
or 3,
too.
2, and then so you go to Richmond. You're our delegate for 24 years, and what were those years again?
1982 until 2005.
Okay.
I didn't run again in 2005 when I had metastasized colon cancer in an election year. You know, and there was just no way to ask voters to support me under those conditions, and there was no way I could run.
Well, you've shown great courage. You look great.
Well,
Thank God.
We keep
You're,
on keeping
knock on
keeping
wood.
on.
Right. I mean, you've really, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you just keep punching back, right?
Right.
And you've shown us all how you can face tremendous adversity. I mean, you've really shown great
Well,
courage.
I don't think that's. I mean,
That was really hard.
yeah. Well, a lot of people have gone through that.
Wow.
I was just lucky to come out on the good end.
As I recall it, there was quite a lot of community support for you. There was a volunteer tree created by Susan Kellum, our longtime Alexandria Democratic Committee chair, who helped get a lot of people wanted to step up and help and walk the dogs and bring food and help straighten up.
She arranged it. They would let her. She would call me the day before and say that such and such was going to come. And at 10 o'clock, different person would call. They'd come in, visit, ask what I needed,
Right.
sit and have tea with me, etc., and go in. Or if I needed to go to the doctor, would take me to the doctor.
Isn't that wonderful?
Back and forth, yeah. So I had it was not like it was such a burden on one volunteer, because we had lots of volunteers that could give a day occasionally, or a morning.
And Susan Kellum was sort of the organizer.
She was the organizer.
Of this sort of like a, well, she has a background in the armed forces, so as I recall. So she's very methodical and organized. She's very organized. So, but I think that really speaks to you and how beloved you are here, and also it speaks to what a great sense of community we have here. That we're sort of we're still a small town. I mean, we have a small town feel, even though we've grown so much. Is that?
Well, I think that's true. It's certainly among the activists in town,
Right.
So it varies, but I the support, I really appreciated. It kept me going.
Isn't that great? And I know everybody knows your dachshunds through the years, so they're very cute. They're not here right now, obviously, because they would be having too much fun with us here, and we'd be distracted. But they are also part of the picture, and they go with you sometimes to the studio.
They're almost always to the studio with me. They have their special friends there that they have to drop in and see.
So it's Alex and Chester now?
Yes, Alex and Chester. They're always 2.
Right.
They're accompanied to each other, and they have their own little system. They're miniature long hairs.
They're very cute. They really are sweet. And so when you were serving, I mean, 24 years, you represented Alexandria so well. You obviously made a lot of friends, but it was still unusual that, I mean, you were in your position as the delegate. Patsy Ticer became our first woman mayor, and then ran for state senate, became the first female in that seat.
Right.
And Vola Lawson was our first female city manager.
Exactly.
And here we also had Elizabeth Ann Campagna, a force of nature in her own right.
Absolutely.
But all 4 of you, it's like almost something was in the water at the time, because
we liked
all 4
each
of you,
other.
and you liked each other.
Yeah.
But you also brought a southern, I mean, Vola, yes, I mean, as I understand it, Vola's from Atlanta. Patsy, most of her life, she grew up here, but her I don't exactly remember where she was born. But
I think she was born maybe in the district, but
she was here from the time she was a child.
Exactly.
Right. But in general, it's something, you're Southern, I mean, all four of you brought something to the table but you all were involved deeply at the same time.
Yeah.
And very important positions. Mm-hmm. Did you ever talk about that
No.
or think about it?
No.
Or you were just so busy living your lives?
Yeah, we liked each other and worked together,
Right.
So it made it easier.
And you had a great aide, Harlene Clayton.
Who's still active, involved in
Very
things in
active.
town.
Terrific person.
No,
yeah.
and besides that, she remembers names fantastically. I'd get back to the studio, and to the office in Richmond,
Yeah.
and I'd start describing somebody to her that I had just met, and she'd tell me the name.
Oh.
You know.
So that's a great help as an aide.
That was a great help and an aid. Yeah, she, is used to kind of knowing everybody. She grew up on the Eastern Shore, where she knew all the community, and
that's right. Yeah, I used
has
to,
a good mind for that sort of thing.
Well, those in office, we meet so many people, and you want to know everyone's name, and it's on the tip of your tongue sometimes, but sometimes you
just
forget.
can't. You can't.
Yeah, and people aren't wearing name tags.
But it's a gift too. I remember going door to door with Jerry Belials when he was running for governor.
Right.
And we were going down King Street and went into the bank there at St. Asaph Street, and he went up to each of the tellers and said, "I'm Jerry Belials, it rhymes with smiles," etc. Then we went upstairs to meet all the management, came back downstairs, and he called every one of those people by their names. He was phenomenal. And my mouth just dropped,
That is amazing.
He had that, a few people do have that incredible gift, and he clearly did.
Wow. So did you stay in touch with him?
Yeah, and I
through
think
the years?
not really. He's passed away recently.
That's right, he did. Yeah. And who in Richmond, was there anyone who maybe mentored you or was a dear friend or
well, actually, I got warm reception from, there were a lot, the Democrats were a very varied right group when I first got down there. We still had people from down the North Carolina line who were sort of conservative Democrats for the most part. We still had people down in Southwest Virginia that were Democrats in those days.
Okay.
And then we had the Northern Virginians, and the mix elsewhere. So it was we were a majority, but we were a fairly diverse majority. And the speaker was from down near the North Carolina line, Philpott, when I first went down. So it was interesting, and some of you got to know really pretty well.
You were quite an advocate for the people of our city in terms of helping the most vulnerable when you were in Richmond. Are there a couple of, you were on appropriations and privileges and elections,
Yeah.
P&E.
I was chair of P&E until the Republicans took over. And I was a senior member of House Appropriations, and was able to get some things for Alexandria then that would not have otherwise gotten. It was my legislation really budget amendments, not legislation, that got special formula for English for the second language in elementary schools.
Oh, good. That's great.
It was extra money to go to localities that were impacted. And some of the legislators in other parts of the state didn't think that they needed that until I pointed out to them,
they did.
That they did.
Yeah.
That there were a lot of Filipino students in the Tidewater, for instance, and that there were major immigrants that needed help, special classes out in the valley, for instance. That was an interesting initiative, and also to get funds initially for the what was in the Alexandria Clinic.
Right.
To serve,
which
has now got another
the
name.
Neighborhood Health Services.
Exactly.
It eventually evolved and was merged into what we now call.
But they were short of funding.
Right.
There was a period of time, they had an initial grant and then lost that. And the city wanted it to continue, but they didn't really want to fund it totally. So I said, if I, could get $100,000 each year from the state,
That's great.
then the city put in the same amount, and then they can go fundraise for this, then they could continue. And that really got that started. That was the basis of
Right. That was
of
in
their fundraising.
Presidential Greens, wasn't it, on the
Yeah.
on the lower level?
Right.
And so that nonprofit eventually, as I understand it, merged into what we now call Neighborhood Health Services, and which is a fantastic nonprofit.
And, well, additional federal funding came along, and that's what really
Well, I
helped
mean,
that
healthcare is one of the biggest issues in our country.
in our community. But
Yeah.
there were some nice advantages of being on appropriations.
So you could really get things done.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
yeah.
Did you drive down to Richmond? You and Harleen probably drove down together. Did you and Patsy, and did you all try to tag team it a little bit?
Yeah, we did, and particularly, I had, particularly when the caucus began meeting on Sunday evening. We had to go down early, and Patsy and I would usually give Patsy a ride down, and we would go because and by that time I had bought a house in Richmond, so that I had a place to stay when I got down there.
Well, that's good. Because
A lot of difference in real estate there and here. Let me tell you.
Well, as I understand it, a lot of people rent an apartment for 2 months, and then
Yeah, well, that's what a lot of people have done, and
Right.
I had rented, stayed in hotels and this, that, and the other. So there was a place she always went and stayed too. So I would drive down and deposit her there, and then go to my place, So and then Harleen would come down, carpool down the next day, because they didn't have to be there till Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
But that varied through the years. We gave each other rides.
so that was fun,
Yeah.
right? And you could talk about the various pieces of legislation and the House and the General Assembly side and the State Senate,
Yeah.
talking about the various bills and.
With all the traffic and other weather, sometimes it was more challenging that way.
Right. So if you could wave a magic wand, are there certain things that you are concerned about or would do differently for not only, really just for our city and Virginia in general?
You mean right now? Given
Yes, the things that you're concerned about. I know that you're very focused on the Torpedo Factory, obviously.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to lobby the present legislators. They have a job to do. And I'm not trying to tell them how to do it or anything like that. So I have not gone down to lobby.
At City Hall.
It's City Hall or in Richmond or anything of that sort.
Or in Richmond either. Okay.
No. And as far as City Hall goes, the only things I've really spoken about lately has been the Torpedo Factory, that I have a direct feel for, of trying to explain it and also support it, keep it going, because as you know, there's always a controversy of some sort or another related to it. But I don't want to be known as somebody just gets in and gives them a hard time on any number of subjects.
Well, but you're one of our most important figures in the community. Mm-hmm. You have been here a long time, and you know all the trajectory of the history of certain decisions that were made at the time. Mm-hmm. I know that you came to see me, and I was very interested in your opinion regarding
the factory,
the Torpedo Factory, and regarding how it would proceed. And one of the things I used to comment on was about the importance of the artists. There's a sense of community there that's very special, and that the public, when the public comes in, they can sense if people are happy or if that sense of joy with the art has to be there. Mm-hmm. That the artists need to feel a sense of stability
Yeah.
and appreciation, I think, from our city, and you know, I certainly sense that this is a time of change, but I hope that the artists continue to be heard, and because I think it's hard to explain to some about that it's hard to be an artist, that you want to just focus on your art, but then if you're also worried about where you're doing your art and if there's tension in your life, then that's difficult for the artist.
Well, yeah, there certainly has been enough controversy from time to time about the factory. We've never had a long period of time in which it was totally quiet or unquestioned, you know. Despite the success of the Art Center in being a metropolitan area business attraction for Alexandria. And our artists, of course, come from the entire metropolitan area.
Right.
And we have lots of foreign visitors. Just about a week and a half ago, I sold a couple of enamels to a woman from Switzerland who was about to leave at the airport to go back to Switzerland. And we packed these. She bought small ones that would be portable. We wrapped them well, and she took off. You know, but we do get a lot of international visitors, you know, as well to the Torpedo Factory. But I can understand that the bureaucratic mind doesn't quite understand why artists work as they do.
Right.
And you know, people come with their own agendas. So we've never had a long period in which there wasn't some controversy related to the Art Center, despite its success and the fact that it's paid its way and it's been a major attraction.
Right. I've always thought of it as the anchor of Old Town.
It is.
That people I know come from out of town want to go straight to the Torpedo Factory
Right.
and have a meal before or after that, and then go shopping elsewhere as well. And they'll shop at the Torpedo Factory. That's the cuckoo clock. But it's beautiful, actually. So it's paid for itself. But of course, arts institutions like the Smithsonian, et cetera, it's hard to put a price on what arts institutions bring to a community.
Yeah.
And as the anchor of Old Town, and the fact that people come here to learn how we do what we do and to replicate it. I know the mayor of Charleston, while I was mayor, was very interested in discovering the secret sauce and took it back to his city, and I think they're creating their own version of it.
Well, there are
many places.
Exactly. No, we've had contact with there are quite a large number of them actually across the country. We tried to keep up with it for a while and gave up. I mean, they all do it somewhat differently depending on their communities and the kind of buildings they can get and whether they include performing arts with it and etc.
Right.
But the idea for it and has gone across the country and even internationally. I know somebody in New Zealand had one.
That's great.
Started one. So yeah, it's gotten a lot of.
That's phenomenal.
It's gotten,
when you think about it.
Yeah, we tried to keep up with it for a while, and as I say, we gave up trying to follow it because we didn't have the staff to do the contacts. But it has been successful, but that has not meant that we haven't had criticisms.
Well, I certainly hope that it continues
We hope so
being
too.
so successful, and I'm very appreciative to you and all the artists who helped make it what it is today, and certainly salute you all for your vision, and certainly salute you for all you've done, and I certainly hope that it continues to have another successful 40 plus years and many more than that. And there's now a Marian Van Landingham gallery that's dedicated to you in your honor on the second floor, and that's beautifully put together.
Third floor.
Yeah. Sorry, third floor.
Yeah, that was an initiative of the Artist Association.
That's great.
So it surprised me. It was very nice.
That was a great evening.
That was a great evening.
Yeah. Just as things continue, I hope you will stay, just speaking for myself, very vocal and involved. And I know you're focused on your art now.
It's nice to be able to retire there for 4 days a week.
So you are there 4 days. I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
So you're there
Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays.
Okay. Well, that's smart to be there on the weekends.
Yeah, that's when our biggest crowds are there.
Absolutely. Well, I really want to thank you so much for taking the time, and it's been really enlightening. And thank you for all your dedication and service to our community.
Thank you very much.
Made a big difference, Marian. Thank you. And thank you for joining us.